Morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. So I'm not going live on the Bitcoin Magazine YouTube channel today, simply because we're going to try and see what happens when we only go on Rumble, because it was great numbers a couple of days ago. So I think I can trick the algorithm into some beneficial propulsion here if I put all my eggs in one basket on Rumble. We're going to see. We're going to test it out. We're testing it out, right? Because we got nearly 50,000 views the other day when we did not go live on YouTube, which was Monday. Today's Wednesday. Yeah, Monday. For some reason, when I said it wasn't working very well, the feed wasn't coming in great. It actually wasn't going on the Bitcoin Magazine YouTube channel for whatever reason. I don't know. So today we're going to try it out on Rumble. I know. Yeah. Sorry, my wife is helping me. I'm explaining that. Yeah, so we're not on Bitcoin Magazine YouTube today. Trying this out, see how it's gonna go. So we are on our normal YouTube channel and we are on Rumble. So thanks everyone. Let's do some good mornings. All right, let's do some good mornings. We got a Vamos from Double B. We got a Ben with a good morning team. I wake up every morning grateful because I Bitcoin. I do Bitcoin too. We love doing Bitcoin, indeed. Bon matin à tous. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Look like the Moscow got bombed. I saw that. We're not going to talk too much about Moscow getting bombed, but I have some excellent Moscow time stuff today. Really good. Double B, hello from Sunny Slope, Arizona. Must be around sunrise time there, I'm supposing. Maybe a little after sunrise. Hope you had a great sunrise, Double B. I believe Arizona desert sunrises to be beautiful. Good morning. Bitcoin asleep? Never, Robert. We are always awake. Bitcoin is always running. Tommy, good morning, friends. Good morning, Tommy. Hope you're doing great. Daniel, you made it. You made it, Daniel. We love it. It just doesn't stop raining here in Vermont, I guess. That's the new thing. It's just rain every day, right? But that's okay. We're not in the desert, so it's to be expected. Double B, what is 100... No, what is 1,000,000 sats among friends? Indeed, what is 1,000,000 sats among friends? 1/100th of a Bitcoin. We love it. All right. Good evening from good evening. Okay, you got some moon action there. We love it. We love it. Okay, so let me just, before I get into Moscow time, confirm the sun is up. Rainy again, but the sun's up, right? Bitcoin is running, no problem. Some people say it might be around forever. Some people say. We're going to talk about that a bit today, right? Some people say it could be around for a long, long time with all these ETFs. But then, if Bitcoin's running and the sun is up, all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. All right, so we got a very special edition of Moscow time today because there's some amazing stuff going on. But first, I just want to offer two other that aren't on theme, right? Because we got a theme to Moscow time today. The first one is one of the grossest headlines I've ever read in my life. But here you go. Way forward, right? So instead of the way as in W-A-Y, like the way forward, they say here way as in W-E-I-G-H, like how much you weigh. Way forward. Scientists working on a fat loss pill, which makes you skinny no matter how much junk food you eat, is a major breakthrough. So don't worry about it, guys. Discipline, none of that matters. You got the pill now. We got a pill, okay? Don't sweat it. This one's pretty good. The New York Post is reporting that the White House cocaine... remember we were told we'll never find out who did it, right? No, we'll never find out who left cocaine in the White House. But now the New York Post is saying that the White House cocaine belonged to a Biden family orbit member. No, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. No way. No way. All right. Now we're going to do our Moscow time for today. And it's a thread from Dr. Simon Godek. So Dr. Simon Godek was, I guess, kicked off of Twitter for a little while. During the COVID hysteria. Elon bought it. He's back. I don't know if he's really a reliable source. Okay, doctor. Already he's got a doctor in his name, but nevertheless, he's good for lots of comedy, right? So he's compiled here all of the feints that the mainstream media has used over the years to explain away heart troubles in young people, old people, any kind of heart trouble. Now, some of these headlines come from before the vaccine, right? So just so you know, these are not all, they can't all be vax related. Okay, but they're still a lot of fun. And Dr. Simon Godek had a huge thread. He put top 20 headlines. Now, I didn't put 20 together, but some of them are just too good to be true. So, and especially when you see them in order and compiled like this. So let me just read a few of these, right? This is a anthology of the greatest hits of Moscow Time Heart Edition. All right, that's what it is today. It's the anthology of the greatest hits of Moscow Time Heart Edition, Heart Health Edition. All right, so some of these you have seen before. Some of these are repeats because we pick these up daily, but now putting them all together is a lot of fun. So here we go. Heart attack, the shower habit that could precipitate a heart attack in the healthy. One of the best things about these is that they try and do these little like jokes in the headlines, right? Oh, you got some heart troubles, you know, precipitate in the shower. This one's good. Sky News, cold snap could cause strokes and heart attacks, doctors warn, right? Ice is likely to be a hazard for much of the week, the Met Office says. This was back in January, okay? So cold weather, heart attack. This one's pretty good. Your blood thickens and then clots. What extreme heat can do to your body. I think I read that one the other day. Artificial sweeteners linked to increased risk of heart disease, study finds. Climate change could hurt babies' hearts. Okay, the babies' hearts could be in trouble. That was from CNN. This is from the Mirror. Being too happy could cause you to have a heart attack, scientists warn. So careful, everyone out there. I don't know if you know you reach that level of sat stacking that made you say, oh, I probably can retire for the rest of my life. But don't celebrate too much, guys. Don't be too happy about your stack because it could kill you. You could just die, right? Express, blood clots, the popular breakfast food that could enhance the risk of blood clotting. Now, I don't eat blood clots as food. I'm assuming it's some British nonsense because this is from Express. So I don't know anything about eating blood clots. I probably wouldn't, but apparently it's an eating thing. And if you eat it, you're going to get a blood clot. That's what they say. CBS, soaring heart attacks due to lack of masking, right? So people aren't wearing enough masks, so everyone's getting a heart attack. And this was from this February, so this isn't even an old one. This one's really good. I remember reading this one live. This brings back, you know, warm feelings. This was back in February. And I can still remember when we were all just sitting there and we didn't even know hearts were so under threat. And I remember reading this one with a lot of sincerity. Moms who give birth in their early 20s at higher risk of heart attack and a stroke. Don't have kids early, you're going to die. A mental illness in your 20s and 30s could mean a greater chance of heart attack and stroke. Okay, so if you got some mental illness, you're going to die. Heart attack. Heart attack. Express again. They're really good at this. This is Express in England. Heart attack. How often you go to the toilet daily signals risk of future heart attack. And Simon Kotick said, if you shit too much, you're going to get a heart attack if you shit too much. This one we read the other day. Weekend lions could actually be bad for your health. Alarming study finds. Research found people who went to bed and woke up 90 minutes later at weekends had gut bacteria linked to heart attacks. So don't sleep in on the weekends. This one's good. This one's good. All right. This one is super, super good. This is from 2020. So before the vax is even out. Right? How being sarcastic could kill you. Scientists reveal heart attack survivors with hostile traits are more likely to die from a repeat event, right? So if you're around there being like witty and sarcastic, you know, you're going to die. Okay, you're just going to die. Express again. Where do you live? Risk of heart attack failure is much higher in certain areas. Says new study. What big science. Stop the presses. People arrange themselves in different demographics based on wealth in different neighborhoods. And guess what? Some are not healthy. This one is a keto-like diet might be associated with a higher risk of heart disease, according to new research, right? So don't eat keto, guys. Don't eat keto. Don't do it. Don't do it. Fatherly, what parents need to know about cardiac arrest in young athletes, right? So this is following Bronny James incident. A pediatric cardiologist puts the risk to kids in context. This one's good. video games could trigger heart attacks in children. Right? It's video games. Now, children, as we know, right, the most likely to get a heart attack, right? And if they play some video games, whoa, careful. You finish that Mario game or Zelda, you find a thing in Zelda, dead, heart attack, stroke. This one's from Ireland. Study finds that. Oh no, hold on. This one's the best. This could only be produced by the fiat-riddled brain of our times. All right, this one has to be one day. This headline needs to be hung in some kind of a museum. They got to frame it and they got to hang it. All right. Now pay attention, because there's no punchlines coming. None. This is Ireland. There's no punchline coming. Study finds that pregnant men are most at risk from heart attacks brought on by climate change. Come on. No. This needs to go in a museum. You go to the Louvre in like 10 years when we're on the Bitcoin standard, right? You go to the Louvre in 10 years and you're going to walk around the Louvre and you're going to go see the Mona Lisa and you're going to go see other things, right? And you're going to bring your kids around and you're going to say, this is what we lived through. This is World War III, guys. Study finds that pregnant men are most at risk from heart attacks brought on by climate change. It couldn't get better. It couldn't get better than that. It can't. I don't even want to read anymore, because that is the greatest headline ever written. That is Moscow time. That's all we got for today. All right. So, I want to see some of these. Changing your duvet cover. It definitely does. It definitely does. Yeah. Jose says that has to be the most fiat and Moscowy news title ever. I think it is, Jose. I think we hang that in the Louvre one day. I think that goes in the Smithsonian or somewhere. We just gotta hang it up, right? We just gotta hang it up. Nick, but Nick, I will say he is amazing value. But please treat it as semi-entertainment. Okay, it's semi-entertainment. We love it, but it's semi-entertainment. It can't be real. It might be. I don't know if it's real, Daniel. I don't know. It sounds real. I mean, who could tell? Remember, the point of Moscow time is that comedy and the real world are the same thing now. And so there is no way to tell. I can't tell. Could you tell if that was real or fake? I mean, 5 years ago, even, I would say, ha. Today, your guess is actually as good as mine. So it's a 50-50 shot about whether that headline is real. If it's real, if it's true that someone wrote a headline that pregnant men are more likely to have a heart attack because of climate change, we have to submit that is the greatest Moscow time headline, either way, of all time. Tom, we're beyond clown world. So now our theme, it can't be real. It can't be real. Yeah, still classic. Yeah, it's got to stay. It's just, we just got to assume it's real. There is no presumption of innocence anymore when it comes to stupidity, and everyone is just counted as being semi-handicapped mentally. That's the only way we can. That's the only way we can approach the world in a stable footing right now, is just to assume that fiat has degraded the mental capacity of most of the people you meet, right? Because the brainwashing and the manipulation and the spin and all of that stuff. So you just have to assume most people are degraded severely from a mental capacity point of view because of all of this stuff. But the good news is we got change coming. And let me explain it. Today's theme, Bitcoin's headed to the moon, fiat pushers falling to earth. And if you are a long time part of the Breakup gang here, you'll know that when we talk about falling to earth, we're not talking about a little parachuting. We're talking about dropping people from space. We're talking about halo jumping hosted by Tom Cruise, where he will push people out of that airplane and they will fall to the planet's surface, either the ocean. Because I do think if you start popularizing this, you could make an edition where you drop them in the ocean. So if they survive the halo jump, there's a whole new bit of entertainment where they got to get out of the middle of the ocean. We'll see how long they last. Right? Could be really fun. We'll see. A bunch of drones going around. Now, are we going to see any space drops soon? Maybe. This is news from today. Rand Paul. So he tweeted this: since AG Garland doesn't appear, so this is Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, doesn't appear to want it to do his job, he sent evidence for a criminal referral to Anthony Fauci and the U.S. At a U.S. Attorney office in D.C. Hans Monkey, who I never know how to pronounce his name, so I'm just going to keep calling him Hans Monkey. Send your referral to GOP state attorneys general. Fauci told his lies in D.C., but he also told them to state and local officials. Had he not lied about everything, states who were expecting a normal, natural SARS virus, not a lab-enhanced one, could have responded very differently. So will he end up being dropped from space, or will these criminal referrals go through? I don't know. It could be. We're starting to get a little more sense of what's going on. I don't know if we're going to ever be able to prove criminal liability or any of these things, but we'll see. There's conversations moving along, and one of them happened just yesterday between Joe Rogan, Mark Cuban, and Rav Aurora. And they were referring to a conversation that Joe Rogan had with, I think it was the Patrick Bet-David interview that continues to get a lot of attention. And so Joe Rogan was talking about it, and they mentioned this Rav Aurora guy. And Rav says, thanks for the mention, Joe Rogan. Got hit with many emails, texts. Joe mentioned you before I got even halfway through it was the Patrick Bet-David podcast. Joe is referring to my private debate with Mark Cuban on vaccinating young men, where he revealed his striking ignorance. So Cuban comes in, okay, Joe Rogan and Rav Aurora, let me ask you a question. Which healthcare insurance company anywhere in the world has raised their rates for people who have been vaccinated? And I think Mark Cuban is making a good point, but I don't know enough about how insurance is calculated, and this is what the debate ends up becoming around. Which has raised their rates for parents of vaccinated teen boys? Which sports organizations now charge more for vaccinated teen boys to participate to cover the increased risk of myocarditis vaccination? So Rav Aurora says, Mark, you clearly have not been following this issue. Again, our system is broken. Youth-related and athletic organizations defaulted to the balderdash from CDC and FDA. It's understandable in that they appear to be highly credible science-based institutions with experts far more experienced in epidemiology and cardiology than you and I combined. Except those experts got umpteen things wrong. Mask mandates, lockdowns, school closures, vaccine mandates, all such policies were seriously miscalculated. Individuals within those organizations have admitted to the fatal flaws of their supposedly noble work. Example, anonymous senior FDA official said, the public has no idea how bad this vaccine data really is. It would not pass muster for any other authorization. And so they end up getting into this kind of debate around it. Say Sai Mehdi, who is also one of these sort of VC guys, comes in and says, I guess you don't know, and he's telling Mark Cuban, I guess you don't know anything about how insurance works. Premiums are often negotiated by employer unless you shop for a policy yourself. Most insurances don't even raise premiums for raging alcoholics or morbidly obese people who have higher usage. I just got to say, before I continue, that my insurer, so this is not a paid publicity, but they sent me this. I'm with Crowd Health, by the way. Crowd Health is a Bitcoin-focused insurer, and they have rules against obesity and smoking. So as long as you're not, and you're good, you can join, and it's pretty cheap. It's actually way cheaper than any other thing. And they sent me a beautiful birthday present, which was a Satoshi coffee pack, and it came in a nice box with the Genesis block as the wrapping paper. Very, very nice insurance company, right? And they do exactly what, say, Mehdi is saying they don't do, right? That they don't allow you to be a raging alcoholic and to be morbidly obese. In fact, they say you don't qualify. You can't even get this insurance, right? So I've been on Crowd Health for a while. I think it's way better than the system in the United States. I get a lot of crowdfunding cash calls, but they still don't even add up to what I would pay if I was in the normal system. I think my monthly insurance before I quit any of it was like $2,000 a month. If you're not American, listen to these numbers. This is normal in America, right? I paid about $2,000 a month for my family of four. $2,000 US a month, and my premiums were still, my deductible was still like $3,000 a person. So I had to spend $6,000 between my wife and I before I even was able to cash in on any of the $24,000 US I paid in insurance a year. That's crazy, huh? So this system is much better. It's like $200 a month or something like that, and it's a savings plan. So what ends up happening is you actually save, I think 70% of the money. It just goes into Bitcoin, and you save it as Bitcoin. So you're only paying like $50 a month. Actually, that's lost. Everything else is saved. You take the savings and pay for your bills because now it's like a savings plan. And if you do have something more, that's when you participate in these crowdfunding initiatives. And that's why when you're called upon to pay every month $200 to $400, you build up your sort of reputation so that other people will contribute if you have an issue. So it's a really good system so far. Now I'm healthy and all that, so I don't need to worry too much about it. But there you go. There you go. Are they? People were plenty stupid before Fiat. They sure were. And even still to this day, like I don't, look, we're going to keep talking about the vaccine. I don't come here for any vaccine answers. I don't know anything about the vaccine. I don't know anything about its dangers. I'm not a scientist. I know men have had lots of heart troubles for years. It just was not talked about, right? Men are kind of not valuable in our young men, not so valuable. No one really cares in our society if they have some epidemic health problem, right? It's not like everyone is freaking out about young men having troubles. They're having troubles as we speak, right? They're not doing so great, and no one really cares. No one even believes them, right? So they've had heart troubles for a while. I know lots of people who have been sort of sounding the alarm, and that went on before the vaccines or anything. So again, I don't know shit about what actually is happening with the vaccine, right? None of it. What I'm interested in, though, is the lying and the system not working, right? The system not working, I think, is the more interesting question, because indeed, we have no proof that Fauci or anyone has ever had to answer any of these questions in a way that would actually make it sort of adversarial, right? They've always had softballs. They were handled with sort of padded gloves by the media. Fauci handled very gently by the media for a long time. And so the problem is we just don't know. We don't have any systems in place that would give us any confidence. And if there's anything we've seen in the past few years to give us confidence in these people, it's just not there, right? We should, at this point, the burden of proof to prove that they didn't do anything wrong is sort of on them, right? Because presumption of innocence, we talk about it sort of regularly here at the Breakup. Presumption of innocence is a thing between like people, right? It's a protective thing for human individuals. It doesn't apply to the state. They don't get presumption of innocence the way a human being does. They have to prove they're not treacherous, right? That you don't give a state, you don't give public figures a presumption of innocence at all. Now, when it comes to their personal life and being able to defend themselves, like I believe Hunter Biden is absolutely can defend himself in court, right? Absolutely, no problem with that. But the systems that have gone in place to protect him until now don't get that presumption of innocence at all, right? If we see corruption here, we see corruption there, it gets no presumption of innocence. And they in my mind, the burden is flipped. They should have to prove they're not evil, right? So now I don't think Fauci is necessarily evil. I think he's made a lot of decisions in his life, and again, he's sort of in a corner, and we're going to talk about what that means. But to me, to this day, that we haven't been able to push him is why you're going to have, I think you're going to have some form of criminal reference eventually that will try and deal with what Fauci did. And I believe that burden of proof in some ways will be flipped. Now, on an individual, Fauci absolutely gets the same benefits as any other citizen. But again, we're talking about systems here. We're talking about systems. We're talking about the capacity for these systems to catch this trouble. And so from here on out, the CDC and all of these people, I think, no longer have any presumption of innocence. We don't just naturally believe they're on our side. And that's kind of what Mark Cuban is saying here. What about all these people, right? What about all these groups? And now the teen sports guys, why didn't they get better advice? Well, that's the problem, Mr. Cuban. That's the problem, right? That they took advice from people that they wholeheartedly believed because they were told to believe because of the hierarchy of authority. And that led them down a road that might have been really unhealthy. Now, we don't know. We don't know. Time will indeed tell, right? We will know after a bit of time. I know that I did not want to subject myself to any of these risks that I didn't understand and I could see were being forced, and it was not something that interested me, right? I could see right away. I knew what my risk, I had a bit of an idea of what my risk profile was around COVID because I'd already had it and I'd already been through it. And I kind of didn't want to add new risk, which was the vaccine, right? So I think a lot of people found themselves in that position, and we had to just sort of be stubborn and difficult, and that was the only way to make it through. But it's the system itself that that I think will come under question after all of this. And I think Mark Cuban just hasn't really opened his mind or his eyes yet to the degree of corruption which is out there. Because I do think Mark Cuban is a more or less honest broker out there. I don't think Mark Cuban is trying to kiss any Democrat butt or anything like that, right? I think people can make mistakes, right? And I don't love everything Mark Cuban believes. But I do think he wants America to be a healthy place. I do think he wants Americans to be healthy. I don't think he's trying to make a buck, right? I think he's rich enough and doesn't really, but mind reading, and I don't know. But nevertheless, we're talking about systems. And if you think about the systems that were in place around this COVID thing, they all failed us. And it was one of the big indications that we have systemic failure all around us, right? It's not just our, health monitoring institutions filled with experts. It's the legal system itself. Look at what's going on in Portland, right? Have you seen any of this case with Andy No? So if none of you remember Andy No, now you have to mention his, well, maybe you don't have to mention it. So maybe I'll just forget. Andy No is a journalist who tried to cover the Antifa stuff in Portland. And he was so poorly treated and abused and attacked and hit in the head, I think, with a skateboard. He was bleeding out of his skull. It's one of the ugliest things you'll ever see, right? And Andy No is I don't, he's not a MAGA guy, right? And he's not like a, I wouldn't say he is a natural enemy of Antifa from a political point of view, but he was there to point out their violence and he was there to point out their mischief, and he paid a physical price for it. And you should see the guy who did this to him. Now, I'm not trying to shame anyone for their look necessarily. What I'm trying to say is looks and psychological state can often be related, right? I don't know if everyone agrees with me. I'm not going to die on that hill. You do have the physiognomy and the psychological connection, which I did not invent, right? There are writers, Balzac in France, many people who have said physiognomy and personality are related. Not making that case strongly here, right? But I am willing to say that this guy who attacked him, you got to just look at his face. It's all just scar tissue. He looks like he's out of a horror movie. Like his face is just a big scar. It looks like skin grafts and different color. He could only really grow hair in patches where it isn't scar tissue. Now, I don't know what happened to him. It looks super traumatic. And I doubt this guy who attacked Andy No has had anything resembling a great life. I don't know what was done to him. He doesn't look like a healthy fella. But here's the problem, right? So he was attacked. There's a video of it. There's all those things, right? So he had a case in Portland, Oregon, and this was about him, Andy No, and the violence, which is on video, where we have a bunch of written statements and testimony and whatever. And what ended up happening? Well, this guy was declared not guilty of attacking Andy No and making him bleed. And the Portland jury, right, said that he's not liable. Then his defense attorney, the Scarface guy, his defense attorney came right out and said, I am Antifa. They talked about how there was intimidation of the jury in the court itself. Jack Possabeek brings that up, right? The judge in the Andy No trial just admitted that jurors reported Antifa was trying to dox them. A journalist was accosted by Antifa inside the courthouse. You think they won't threaten Trump jurors too? That's the DC thing. Understand where we are headed. So he again says, Jack Possabeek, he says, conservatives need to use outcomes like this to prepare the low information but fair-minded voters for what's coming for Trump, right? Because when he says low information, it means these people, often people aren't aware, right? They've never heard of these things. Scott Adams was talking about a show. He would like to do a show where, and I think this would work for Bitcoin too, right? He wants to do a show where you just take typical pleasant Democrats or anyone who's low information, and you present them with information and watch the reveal. Remember we were talking about it, like we were talking about how in the next year you're going to get a bunch of this, right? You're going to get a bunch of that genre of when you listen to music, you put, not when you listen to music, when, let's say, kids who had nothing to do with the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and their parents had nothing to do with all the popular music that was being created at the time. So you'll get often these kids who have never heard XYZ song, and they'll listen for the first time, and it's some kind of it's not just kids. Like there's a classical German woman who is a classically trained musician who has no experience or context for rock and roll. So she'll just go listen to like a Led Zeppelin song, which has some, sort of classical traits to it. And she'll be like, wow, totally different. Didn't know this was it. So it's a whole genre, right? Listens to the Beatles for the first time. Wow, I didn't know it was so good. So that whole aspect, I think, would be excellent for Democrats, and would be excellent for Bitcoiners and fiat people, right? So many people don't even understand how the system works. I think if you did a show where you're just like, explaining to people, well, the money is here, and then how does the debt happen? Well, the truth is they have your social security number is used as collateral in order to borrow money. and people don't know that. So people don't understand what's happening. And I bet you could create that genre somehow with the Bitcoin world, right? Just explaining to people what a scam fiat is. And they would learn it for the first time, right? I think you could actually record that and make a show out of it. But you could do it for low information people as well in voting, and that's what Jack Posobiec is saying. And indeed, we're just openly talking about Alan Dershowitz, for example, who I think is one of the better legal minds out there. Alan Dershowitz is just casually saying, well, of course Trump's going to be guilty of the thing in Washington, D.C. with the Jack Smith and the January 6th stuff. But don't worry, because and he'll be guilty because the jury will just find him guilty, right? They're from DC, of course. So he has to wait till he gets to the Supreme Court in order, and then at the Supreme Court, Trump risks no worry about what he did being criminal or whatever it is they're doing with the January. I don't even know what he's not going to get he's not going to get, as we know, the charges that Trump is facing in DC do come with the capital punishment, not space dropping, right? That's our own thing. They're not going to drop Trump from space. They're probably just going to hang him or shoot him or do something like that. If there is capital punishment associated, I don't know what it is for capital punishment down there, but never forget that Trump he is facing capital punishment for what he did, right? Tommy, smoking cigs or just smoking? No, just nicotine, just nicotine. So with the charges that are coming against Trump, we're just openly saying he's facing capital punishment charges, and he will be guilty because he can't get jurors in DC to ever see him as innocent. It's just not going to happen. So everyone's just baking it in that he's going to be guilty, and that he'll have to go to the Supreme Court. And at that point, don't worry about it, right? At that point, don't worry about it. He's not going to get executed. Don't worry about it, right? But think about what we're already accepting. We're already accepting that in Washington, D.C., you can't get a fair trial. You can't get a fair trial in Portland, Oregon now, right? You can't get a fair trial in Portland, Oregon. So Andy, no way he was able to do that, right? What about this guy? Or let me do the Fisher King. Fisher King has this one thing as well about the Andy No stuff. He says this is a big deal. They had this stuff on video, and a Portland jury doesn't give a shit. Places personal ideology above the law. Latest example of how conservatives will not get fair trials in overwhelmingly blue districts. Now think Trump in DC, which is exactly what I just said. Now, what about this one too? This is a rancher, right, in Arizona. And here's the headline, right? This is not a Moscow Time headline. This is a real headline. Arizona rancher who shot cartel drug smuggler dead on his property made 30 to 40 calls to Border Patrol in January alone, as photos show nearby roads littered with clothes and trash left by migrants. All right, so this rancher, right, who shot the cartel guy dead, is now being prosecuted for shooting a human trafficker, right? So he's being prosecuted. He's 74 years old and he's facing a murder conviction for doing this, a murder conviction for doing this. Now, he killed somebody. Okay, I would say you should take a look, right? You don't just let people kill people, even if they are smuggling humans across the border with guns and all that stuff. But nevertheless, right, he asked them for 30 or 40 times in a month. He asked for help and they didn't give it to him. Is he going to get a fair trial? Nobody knows, right? No one knows. And then you think about what the Bidens have done, right? You go and think about what the Bidens have done, and now you think about Joe Biden and the this line that they've been saying forever. Everybody wanted Shokin fired in Ukraine. Well, who's everybody? Who like it was the biggest issue in France. France was like, oh shit, that attorney general who's fucking around with Burisma. Whoa, boy, right now. Who even cares about Ukraine? No one knows about that shithole country. No one ever thought about it before all this stuff happened 2 years ago. And as if anyone gave a shit in 2018 about the attorney general of fucking Ukraine. Can you name an attorney general in another country? I can't. I don't even know the attorney general in Canada. I don't know who these people are. Would anyone care about a runaway attorney general in some shithole country halfway across the world? Of course not. No one gives a shit, right? And now that's what Biden's line has always been. His line has always been, everybody wanted him fired. Who's everybody? Who is everyone? Right? Can you get someone to testify you wanted him fired? Because I'm sure it was the number one issue in England, right? Everybody in England was like, we got to fire this attorney general in Ukraine. What the fuck's he up to? Right? This guy in Ukraine, what's he doing? It's a number one priority in the world, the attorney general of Ukraine, right? So he would go out and say, this guy's got to be fired. Everybody wants him fired. Who's everybody? Who's everybody? And who is it? The idea here is that with this case in Ukraine, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, now the problems with the legal system, the sweetheart deal for Hunter, the cocaine troubles, where maybe he did and maybe he didn't. But the point is, if you add all of this up, if you add up Hunter Biden and the legal troubles in DC, if you add up the Trump legal troubles, which look related, right? I mean, if people are still out there saying Ukraine is independent of Biden, Trump, they're out of their minds. And it looks more and more like COVID is part of the situation, right? What happened in 2020 January when Trump was impeached for the phone call about this guy, about Shokin? What happened? COVID came, right? Now, War Clandestine and others do absolutely believe they're related. I don't know. We don't know what Fauci was up to, right? There's some people out there who say the whole thing was about voter change so that they could do that's what War Clandestine is saying all the time now. The picture is clear. The whole point of the 2020 launch of COVID was to get lockdowns in order to change the U.S. voting system to have a scam election in 2020. Now, that's what War Clandestine is saying, right? I have not 100% put COVID and everything like that together with Joe and Trump. But the story makes sense if you tell it that way, right? Now, but that's narrative bias. You got to be careful. That's narrative bias. You want it to be true, right? So you got to be careful when you want things to be true. You got to be careful. Now, it really could be, right? So we don't want to be too careful. But this idea of the prosecutor is what's important. And Matt Gaetz here has one of the best ideas to start tripping these things up. Because remember, look, we have no confidence in the legal system whatsoever, right? None. You can't. It's almost impossible. But here's what Matt Gaetz says. The Bidens know the power of a prosecutor they control at home or abroad. So Matt Gaetz is referring here to the Viktor Shokin thing, right, in Ukraine. And he says, I've called the House to demand testimony from Jack Smith, right, the guy who's prosecuting Trump. It only happens if many more lawmakers join me. It needs some backup. But anyway, who cares about the details and who is right? I don't know. The point is, no one has confidence in these systems anymore. That's the important thing. The most valuable part, maybe the most valuable resource in the world, is the credibility of the U.S. justice system, because upon that is the U.S. dollar. Upon that is global markets. If the US dollar, it's just what we've said a few times now. The Jerome Powell said it. As long as the US has the rule of law, the US dollar will continue to be the global reserve currency. Guess what? Guess what? We don't have that. So what happens next? You know what happens next, right? We know what happens next. So while we see this happening, while we see prosecutors being dragged in who are, what they keep saying about Jack Smith, the steely, handsome triathlete, right? They're showing their hand. They're showing how the machine works. And I think people are wising up to it, and more every day are wising up to it. And although they've destroyed America's greatest resource, the legal system, and U.S. credibility in the rule of law and having the rule of law and being the major proponent of rule of law around the world, because that rules-based order is completely in the trash. Because we still don't know who had cocaine in the White House, and I don't think we need to know who had cocaine. It's still not the important question. The important part of the cocaine story is that people come out and say, we could never find out. We can never find out. We will never know. Oh no, what are we going to do, right? The most viewed place in the world, what are we going to do, right? Now, and now it's coming out more and more, right? Newsweek. Max Abrams writing today, does Ukraine have compromat on Joe Biden? So finally now talking about this, right? What is it about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden that made the Ukrainian situation? Would we be in the Ukraine war if Trump was still president? I say no. I say unequivocally no. I could be wrong, right? I say unequivocally no. And I think the war is even over. I think the war as it is, there's still people dying. But what would happen if Trump said the following today, right? What if Trump woke up today and said, you know what? Every death from now on in Ukraine is a waste, because the minute Joe is out, the war's over, right? And what would they keep fighting over there? Maybe not, right? But I think you can start to see things like that. I think you're going to start to see things become much more confusing. And indeed, I from 2020 on have said America has two presidents. Trump can still behave as a president, and enough people would acknowledge it and follow him, which is a good place to be in, right? In the sense that, well, a good place to be in if you're an accelerationist, not a good place to be in if you're looking for stability from all of these things, right? So there you go. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying this morning as well that they've got now more proof of $20 million coming to Joe Biden. Who knows if Marjorie Taylor Greene is right about this, but if there are more things, if people keep looking and they're finding more and more of this stuff, then very well could be the case, right? Hold on. American systems absolutely falling apart, not even worth saving, right? And you can tell who's sort of left around trying to, and none of any who's left around, who continues to try to make sense of this old world and is still trying to hold on and preserve what once was, right? You can see it all around you. And the people who are doing this and are not adapting and are not changing and are not seeing the things shift are starting to hallucinate more and more. So here's the thing. Here's the way to protect yourself from cognitive dissonance in this environment, right? So remember, the first thing you have to do is say, am I seeing both sides? Can I articulate what the other side says with respect and with actual time taken to measure and really understand another point of view, right? So first of all, that's really important, right? Because if you can do that, if you can see both sides, you're immediately protecting yourself from cognitive dissonance, because you're not getting bought in with any narrative bias or anything like that, right? Really important stuff. Now, if you don't have that, what'll end up happening is when you do face cognitive dissonance, you're going to hallucinate. You're just going to see things that aren't there. So the person hallucinating is usually the one who has cognitive dissonance, all right? So the person hallucinating has cognitive dissonance. And one of the most valuable things that's happened in the past few months, but then even yesterday, with the Sam Harris guy. Sam Harris, and I think of Sam Harris as someone who is suffering from TDS, and it really just completely broke his brain, and is still trying to make sense of Hunter and Joe and liberals and conservatives. He's still trying to make sense of the world in the old binaries, right? He doesn't understand the massive third rail change that's coming up and brewing up inside of America. That's what I see anyway. That's what I see. And so he comes on, he was on some podcast, right? And he said the following: for the first time in history, we did not have a peaceful transfer of power. So Sam Harris argued that January 6th was worse for the country than government-driven censorship of COVID misinformation. Now, you got to even just look at the physiognomy again of Sam Harris. Something's fucked up with his eye, like it's all droopy now, right? So he's trying to talk and his eye's all like droopy. And then his nose has some issue with it, right? And Cernovich says, ever heard of alcoholic's nose? That's what Sam looks like here. He's been hitting the bottle hard. The good news is that he's showing you what a cautionary tale looks like. People used to respect this guy. Now he's an incoherent drunk. You get Cernovich going further. Is Sam Harris an early stage of dementia? Did he have a concussion, or maybe his alcoholism caught up with him? Anyone familiar with alcoholics sees the red flags, right? Then Scott Adams says, is this the... So again, talking about, once again, right? He's talking about how a little bit of trespassing, this is what Scott Adams says, in this reality that I don't recognize, trespassing in the Capitol building was nearly a coup, right? Nearly a coup. So trespassing in the thing was nearly a coup. So look, I don't know exactly what's going on with Sam Harris, but here's I think a good way to understand what's going on. And this is the following. This is from Bowtied Bull. Bowtied Bull, if you guys don't know, one of the best when it comes to ego death, one of the best, I think, people out there to advise on saving in Bitcoin and being a degenerate with the shit coins, because he is an absolute degenerate. But he has pretty good advice on when to get in, when to get out, and he's not caught up by the fucking tech. He's just a scammer, right? But one I respect a lot. I got to interview him this year. I'm a huge fan. The interview sucked, by the way, if anyone goes looking for it. I had to use one of those like mechanical translator things over remote. It just didn't work out great. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He says the following: the majority don't give it their all to protect their egos. It is much harder to give 100% at times and realize you just weren't good at something. So they do it 80-90% to protect their fragile egos. Well, I coulda. If you believed you could go 100% and prove it. So I don't care about the 100% part. What I care about is Sam Harris still having this sort of disaffected, oh, I'm above it all, I'm like an intellectual, and the worst crime was what Trump did, and because he's got these really bad manners, and it's okay if the every other system collapsed, right? It's okay if all these systems collapse and America can't rely on them. It's okay if the justice system is garbage. It's okay if we don't have elections that are credible anymore. That's fine, right? It's fine. It's style points. So that's how you can tell when someone has had one of these problems. And exactly, the hallucination here is that trespassing was a coup, and that somehow we didn't have a peaceful transfer of power, and that somehow the Jack Smith case is like proof, right? So if you need an example of what a actual broken brain looks like in real time, you got to look at Sam Harris, right? And just study him. Like don't look at him for information or anything like that. Don't even look at him to have any of your own ego boost, like, look how stupid this guy is, I'm right? Don't even bother with that. That's not where the interesting thing is with Sam Harris. The interesting thing is not how wrong he is. It's not that. It's watching someone hallucinate, watching what it does to their body, right? What's up with his eye? I don't know. Right now, people have weird physical things. It happens all the time, right? But it looks a little sketchy, right? It looks a little sketchy. So, but this voting thing, right? Having credible elections and the systems that are in the United States, we can see the justice system. You can't count on it, right? You can't count on it. And the thing that has really created not even a timeline for when this is getting fixed is the problem with the elections in the United States, right? Now, Bitcoiners will always recognize this trade-off. I mention it all the time. I mention it all the time because I think it's the easiest way to talk about this, and that's why I hope to share this frame for you. You don't get into Dominion and this and that, and no, right? Keep it simple to what people who debated Bitcoin scaling in the early days knew and still know to this day. If you understand Bitcoin systems and you understand the trade-offs that come into scaling in Bitcoin, you understand immediately that we never had the choice to have a Bitcoin that ran super fast and was also credible. There is no choice there. Maybe BIP 300, Austin is going to tell me, and yeah, of course there are engineering ways to get more out of the system, right? You can get more out of the system, but the trade-offs remain the same, right? And I use the 2 C's for these trade-offs because it's easy to remember, and that's convenience and credibility. Right. So Ethereum came along and said, we're going to try and make it more convenient, even though it's not. Right. They traded credibility for convenience. The scaling debates around blockchains, which was the entire industry, right, debating scaling. When I entered the industry, that was it. That was everything. It was debating the scaling of Bitcoin and everything else that went along with it. I was a big fan of the event series Scaling Bitcoin, which was exactly about that. And you could actually have at the time, there were other coins that went in and said, we're an experiment, we're going to try this way, and maybe Bitcoin can adopt it. So the whole idea here is that, Bitcoiners have long understood the trade-offs in system design between credibility and convenience, right? Credibility and convenience. When you apply that trade-off in blockchains, it actually graphs directly onto the voting system. Right. So now when you think back to what happened in 2020, it wasn't about credibility. It was about convenience. Oh, we have problems because of the virus. You can't go around other people. We have to do mail-in voting and all of these things. Right. So it was a trade-off, and people chose convenience. Now, I don't believe that's a good trade when it comes to a system where credibility is all that matters. And Vivek Ramaswamy gets that, right? So Vivek comes out yesterday and is now talking wholeheartedly about election integrity, which is really the only game that matters still in the United States, right? Every other game, because the Federal Reserve technically is not part of the U.S. government, so I don't count that. That is the real game, but the other part of it is this, right? And he says, Vivek, here's the way forward on election integrity. 1, single day voting. 2, make election day a national holiday. 3, paper ballots. 4, government issued voter ID matched to the identification on file. If we achieve this, I will lead all American, regardless of political party, to move beyond the debates about election outcomes or ballot fraud. This is easily doable and should not be controversial. And even above that, Vivek added one more point that doesn't come through in this tweet that I think got a lot of attention, which is that you should cancel Juneteenth or another useless holiday, he said. Now, I disagree with Vivek. I'm a fan of the Juneteenth holiday. I was in Brooklyn for the, I guess, original big one, right, in the George Floyd time, and I had a great time. I lived in Bed-Stuy, and people loved it. Other than my town being burnt to the ground, these were my last days in Brooklyn, by the way. Juneteenth was like a nice respite, and I had a good time. And I don't care about the details. I say add more holidays to the schedule, not fewer. So I'm not going to agree with Vivek, but what I'm going to say is this is likely Vivek just doing the Trump move, where if you say a good idea, that's fine. But the Trump thing was always to throw just an idea that lit your brain on fire. So you had to look at the good idea, right? You look at this weird bad idea, so you look at his good idea. So this was pure Trump. Vivek learning really well. He's got all kinds of African Americans freaking out on him today about this, right? But he'll be able to rein it in, just like Trump always did, right? So Vivek, I think, is he better than Trump at campaigning? He might be. I mean, he might be. He might have learned from Trump and is sort of one level up. So there you go. That's what we got on this. Now, the contrasts to all of this, right? The contrast to all this. You get all of these systems breaking. You get all of this shit going wrong. Even look at the finance world, right? We get this from WeWork, right? WeWork falling apart. We get WeWork bonds saying that basically because of their bond exposure, they have substantial doubt. This will be sad for me, right? I was a WeWork guy in New York for years and have nothing but fond memories of the WeWorks that CoinDesk grew up in New York City. It was a great time and a great period of my life. So I'll always look fondly on the history of WeWork. So, but it looks like it's over, right? And Meester reminds us all that what WeWork is going through with this bond exposure, because that's what it was. They bought too many of these bonds, and because they bought too many of the bonds, they're basically got duration mismatch, and because they didn't manage their risk to this bond exposure, they're probably done. And let me just get Tur's tweet about it, because Tur was underlining what a problem it is. So he says, and so the Joe Consorti is the first, says WeWork bonds yield almost 90%. When they mature in 2025, WeWork will have to borrow again at 90% or sell its assets to make ends meet. And Joe says, does this sound like a soft landing for US office space? So it sounds like it's over. And Tur says, this chart illustrates what's starting to happen with world government bonds. When yields soar, you lose the ability to refinance debt unless you devalue the currency. WeWork just came out saying it was substantial doubt over its ability to keep operating, right? So bonds from a national fundraising point of view, dead. From a corporate point of view, dead, right? So the legal system, dead. Bonds, dead, right? Elections, dead. Meanwhile, the only thing that's alive, and this comes from the chairman of, I wish I knew the name. I didn't get it here in the thing, but some rich guy was on some show. The stupid tweet I took here doesn't have enough info. And he says, the chairman, this is from the Bitcoin Archive, chairman of $385 billion private equity group, whose name I did not copy, says, the mighty BlackRock is willing to have a Bitcoin ETF. Maybe Bitcoin is going to be around for a while. So what's going to be around for a while, according to some rich guys? Bitcoin. Do you think this rich guy is going to say, oh, yeah, WeWork is going to be around and bonds? And what about the U.S. justice system as it is? What about U.S. elections as they are? Are they going to be around for a long time? We don't know. It doesn't look like it, right? Now, they're going to change. They're going to change, but not in their form that they are now. And big change is coming, right? Big change. Is Bitcoin going to change? No, we're good, right? We don't need to change. Everything's good, right? We might do a little BIP 300, but that's not really cataclysmic change, right? And a lot of those features we can have access to already. So there you go, guys. It's you can see the momentum that Bitcoin has and the systems that are coming from Bitcoin and the understanding that Bitcoiners have. And you can add all those systems up and it looks ready to go to the moon, right? The opposite can be true for the fiat monsters who might get dropped from the moon back to Earth. And I continue to think that it will be the most entertaining way to solve these problems, that that it's got to be something that we have to understand exactly how wretched some of the players were in the past few years. I made a promise to myself at the start of COVID, I would never get angry about any of it. None of it. None. I never got angry about masks, lockdowns. I avoided them all. I scammed and schemed my way out of any of the catch-alls that would have got people angry. But I preserved all of my anger is not the right word. I preserved all of my hopes about how it worked out to this time now, to when we actually can decide who is criminal and not just wrong. I look, if Fauci or anyone got it wrong, like I'm saying Mark Cuban got it wrong, no problem. I don't want I saw someone saying drop Mark Cuban from space. I'm not in a Mark Cuban from space drop. He's not even close to my list, right? He's not even close to my list. Now I could see why someone, if you ever find some criminal, whatever, right? But I think the people who were criminal about any of this stuff, they're dropped. They're dropped. That means by criminal, I mean the intention has to be to hurt for your own benefit, right? You got to know what you're doing. And I don't think someone like Mark Cuban knew or didn't know. Now, did Fauci? Maybe. Yeah, I'd say Fauci might be drop zone candidate number one. I don't think Joe's going to make it that far. I don't think we need to drop Hunter either, but maybe we'll see. We'll see. Maybe Joe gets dropped though. Maybe he gets dropped. Salam, loving the way transcendent Fauci looks on the thumbnail. Well, he hopefully it seems like he's falling from space, because he should be seen as falling to Earth. That was what I was going for. You got to be careful with some of these, you know. You got to be careful. All right, let me get to some of these quotes. Yeah, Nick. Bitrio. Hey, Nolan, question about parenting. Do your kids do online school? Any websites you recommend, or just advice on schooling your kids in general? Thank you. Yeah, sure, Bitrio. So my kids are still a little young, right? 5 and 4. And my whole thing is you actually don't need to systematize their education much at all. They have a desire to learn. They ask me all the time, can you teach me this? Can you teach me that? My system is really simple. I don't do any online school. I just spend time, at least a half an hour, reading. And I get them to read the letters back and the words back. And I reward them at the end. My wife has put an end to it, but I was paying them for a long time. I'd pay them $5 at the end of the week for sitting down and learning, and they loved it. So I think you can. I still think it's not a bad idea. My wife wanted to promote the joy of learning, which I'm fine with. I still think you should teach people that if they do something, they should get paid for it. So I have I'll reinstitute that at some point when it means a little more to them. No, the system is just take sort of the same time every day. My wife will do morning activities with them coming up after this. I'll do it in the afternoon before we go out and play. And so I don't use too much online school. It's mostly, even when I take them out, so we'll do 30 minutes of reading, and then we'll go for a walk. And the walk is usually they have a million questions, right? This and that. We learn a ton of stuff. My kids know all about geography, and I'd say we're a little slow on math, but they're not quite there. They're still not that interested. It doesn't take much time if that's what you're worried about. I'd say total in the day that the kids are getting educated with an adult is an hour. They do their own arts and crafts a lot and their own activities a lot. I guess I do let them have games for their iPad that are mostly educational. So Code Spark is one that we have subscription to. There's a few others. I forget which ones exactly, but there's certain times in the day they're only allowed to play those games. They can't watch any shows on their iPad. They can't play other games. They have 2 or 3 other games that they like. They're not allowed to play those. So that would be the only other online thing, but we don't really involve ourselves with that. It's figure it out, right? Usually how many, which colors, shapes, pattern recognition, that kind of stuff. Pattern recognition, I think, is the one you should leave to the games, because they're way better at than you'll ever be, right? Pattern recognition in games is really good education and fun. They can get it. They can play that for 2 hours and get addicted. So, Joe, the sun is up and Bitcoin is running. What a day indeed. I'll have another sip to that, right? Sarcasm for the kiln. Changing your duvet cover. That was the most Fiat and Moscow news title ever. It was. Yeah. We're beyond clown world. We are. Yes. Good morning, all you unattractive, unpopular, unemployed, lonely incels. Hey, Wayne. Hope you're doing well. We're all unattractive, unpopular, unemployed, lonely. Are they following? We tossed them, Joe. Jose, the whole. So I had I had a dream about this, which was we had COVID on a ship. We were sailing around the Caribbean this winter, and my daughter, my 4-year-old, we all had COVID. My daughter, and she was struggling breathing all night, and I was in my delirious trying to sleep stage, and that's where I had the vision. Remember what they did to Tom Cruise? You're crazy, because he was against Big Pharma. Well, he's the host, and he's doing the old halo jump from Mission Impossible, whatever, except he's pushing people out. So the dream stuck with me. It's just a crazy dream, but it might come true. We'll see. Gently pushed, then given an Acme parachute packed with an anvil. That's exact. Well, so I want what I want is they don't get any training. Maybe you give them a parachute, because it's still not easy to get out of space, right? Remember how everyone tuned into the Red Bull guy and it was can you make it? I don't think it's that easy. So I think you can just give them a straight parachute. If they survive, fine. But that's why you try to make the drop zone at an ocean target point. So then they have to, it could be like a Survivor show, right? It could be one. We'll see. Okay, it is fake. Thanks, Nick. Too bad. Yeah, but like I said, you can't tell. We live in a world where you can't tell if that like off the bat you can't tell, right? So yeah, indeed, it is just smoking nicotine. I'm hoping they can get it going in Australia. I think the parachute stuff, yeah, Australia will get someone to drop catching parachute from weather balloon. If one makes it safe to surface, then one gets a free ticket, but marked forever with the great achievement and the result. Yeah, yeah. So what Bushmaster is saying here, all the UFO weather balloons that were going around. So what you do is you bring them for a halo jump, and you say, you got one chance, bro. You grab that weather balloon on your way down, and you can make it. You're gonna live. And then they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter what I did. I made it. I'd be into that. That's a fair trade. That's a fair trade. I'd totally be into that. Drop two together with one pair. I can't even read that one, Daniel. That would be good. That would be good. What did you think? What was going through your mind when you snatched that parachute out of Fauci's hands, Bill? Nah, see, I don't want Mark Cuban being dropped. I don't see what he did wrong. He disagreed with you. He's in the insurance game. I mean, look, like we said, the heart stuff has been trouble from before. I still don't I don't think died suddenly is journalism, right? I don't think that. I wouldn't think of it as even. It's entertainment. It's narrative bias being fed to you because we all love narrative bias, right? We all love it. What science I agree with? All the science that agrees with me. That's my favorite science. That's the only science that's true. And I think we all think that, right? If the science agrees with me, it's good science. If it doesn't agree with me, it's shit, right? It's total shit. Unfortunately, that's the state of science. I've lived in Ukraine for 3 months and it's absolutely a shithole country. Yeah, it's like everyone in the world wanted to know about the AG. The status of the Ukrainian attorney general was like the priority. I can't name. You give me one country bigger than Ukraine. Who's the attorney general of Russia? I don't know. Who's the attorney general of England? I don't know. Japan? China? I don't know any. I know one attorney general, the United States attorney general. That's it. That's it. There is no we got to get this attorney. And that's just me. You can go and ask anyone in England. Anyone. I dare you. Go ask anyone. The prime minister, anyone in cabinet. Who's the attorney general of Ukraine? They won't be able to tell you. No one cares. So when Biden went out and said everyone wanted him fired, no one ever stopped and said, who's everyone? Is it a big international thing that everyone's concerned about the Ukrainian prosecutor? Give me a break. Who would care? Who would care? Who's the AG of India? Nobody knows. I don't think anyone in India knows. COVID, where it started, China, not US. Yeah, it could be Bushmaster. COVID was tool to disturb China pushing ahead, plus to cover already collapsing. It could be, yeah. But there's look, all of that is probably true. I try to not buy crazy things about China coming from any American source, including Trump. When he called it China virus, well, it still doesn't explain why gain of function was being paid out of America, right? There are some people who say that what was going on in Ukraine was related to Wuhan. I don't know. Nobody knows. No one knows, right? They are spinning up all over the world at the expenses of these nations' citizens. I think that is more likely the motivation for the COVID plan if you want to go there. Yeah, don't know. I just don't know. Problem of U.S. rule of law is it doesn't apply to executive branch. Doesn't look like it. Seems like COVID was planned, but it was exciting. Could be, Steve. Could be. Again, everything we know is debatable, right? Because we don't know enough. We're still missing too much. But it will come out. It will all come out. He doesn't care. Yeah, exactly. This is the broken brain of Sam Harris again. And Tommy says he's too invested in being miserable. He really is. Austin, BIP 300, all-time high technology. We love it. Yeah, and this is the Louis commenting on the trade-offs in Bitcoin. Scaling, credibility, convenience applies and graphs directly onto the election system. It's the same debate. There's no difference. It's the same trade-offs, right? So you don't get to have both ways. You don't get to have credible and convenient. Yeah, Johnny, we love more holidays. Newland's down. Newland goes. Newland is one of the first. She might be my number one. She might be my number one. Right? All right, I gotta get going here. Kid size parachutes. It's evil. All right. Yeah. So, Slarty, but you know what I think about studies? All of them are shit. Remember what I said. The only studies I agree with are ones that agree with my takes. If they don't agree with me, it's shit science. Now, I'm wrong all the time. So what does that say about science and our ability to measure it? I don't own a lab. I don't run studies. I don't do any of this stuff. I could never check on the Moderna vax myself, and I have no clue about myocarditis. So I'm sure you could find millions of studies one way or the other. All of them are scams. All of them. There is no study one way or the other that's useful. The whole thing is fucked up, broken, doesn't work. So I bet we can find a million studies proving myocarditis from the vaccines. I still don't believe it, right? I still don't believe it. Does the vaccine causing heart troubles mesh with my observations about reality? Yeah, but I could be wrong, right? Spanish study, also shitty, right? Shitty. Like, I don't have any confidence in Spanish scientists, just like I don't have any confidence in Americans or anyone. Right? I mean, just anyone. If a Bitcoiner came out with a study, maybe. If there was some Bitcoiner out there who had the skills to do this, I could probably come closer to believing it. Yeah. It's about the credibility of the people doing it in the end. I don't even know about that, Slarty. Some of this stuff is unknowable, right? It's just unknowable. Now, we'll see. I mean, I hope we find out. I still think that there is, and to give Sam Harris a little bit of credit when he said that everyone believes that the mRNA vaccines are dangerous. They might be, but I don't think we should abandon the platform. I think there's probably still some reason to look into it. I don't know though. I don't want to be a doctor. I never wanted to be a doctor. I'm not trying to be a doctor. I'm not trying to be a scientist, right? I wish we could have confidence in our scientific community to do this work for us. Unfortunately, we don't live in that world. Unfortunately, we have to do our own research and all look like idiots, right? Because it doesn't work. Like, you can't actually do your own research. We're stuck with it, but it's not a good look, right? It's not like I don't want to be like fucking test tubes, like, I'm not going to do any of that stuff. Right? Never, never. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I hope you're doing great. And, I guess, Lardy, look at whatever studies you'd like. And I look at all kinds of studies. It doesn't mean I avoid studies. I look at them, but their ability to persuade me is zero. All of them. All. I believe the ones that believe what I believe because it's not persuading me. I already believe that, right? So it didn't do any work on me. That's why I say I only believe in the science that believes in what I believe, because science isn't going to persuade me to believe one way or the other anymore, right? It used to be I would be like 50-50. Now it's zero. It's zero. The number is zero. The number of studies you should believe are zero, right? None. But, you could still talk about them and listen, right? All right, team, that's all I got. I shall see you all tomorrow. Have a great day.